Today we're checking out another free add-on that comes bundled with Blender called Assign Shape Keys. So to activate that add-on, all you need to do is go to Edit, Preferences, click Add-ons, and it's right up here at the top. Assign Shape Keys, check there. So this add-on can be found in the sidebar over here. It creates a new tab called Edit tab, and it creates this menu called Curve Shape Keys. So you can click that open, and here is the add-on. So the purpose of this add-on is to help you convert curve objects into a single curve's shape keys. But before we get into how the add-on actually works, it might be a good idea to quickly refresh you on what a shape key is. So let's select everything, delete it, and let's add a Bezier curve. So here's your run-of-the-mill Bezier curve. We can press Tab to edit. We can click on these different points and press E to extrude. To change it, move its handles. Might be easier if we switch this to tweak. So we can grab these handles like this, similar to programs like Illustrator or Inkscape, stuff like that. So over here in the Properties panel, by default we are on the Object tab. What we want to open up though is the Data tab here. These two tabs are always going to correspond to each other in a major way because this is the object and this is the object's actual contents. For that reason, I sort of wish these tabs were right next to each other and maybe a similar color, but if wishes were horses, am I right? But here on the Curve Data tab, we have a bunch of different options. What we want to take a look at now is the shape keys. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this menu up to the top so that it is front and center. And I'm also going to pull up Geometry and the Active Spline. Geometry, Shape, Active Spline, and Shape keys are four menus that you will use a lot when dealing with curves, so it's nice to bundle those together. Okay, so say we wanted to make an animation where this curve goes from being a snake-like situation to a straight up and down situation. What we could do is hit Tab to go back into object mode, and we could press plus, which creates technically our first shape key, which is just a copy of the object, the curve, in its original form. And then everything we make after that will be something that we can morph it into. So when we press plus, we get this key 1. And if we were to continue to press plus, we'll just get multiple keys. And we can rename these as well. So we'll rename this first one to stand up. And then so we could press tab to go into edit mode. Because this one is selected, this is the state or the morph that we will be editing. And so we could say select all these and just held Alt and tap middle mouse button to get into this orthographic view. R to rotate, Control to constrain. Move these up here. Maybe come to control points, click smooth. Then we can press Shift R a bunch of times to repeat whatever the last thing we did in Blender was. And that doesn't exactly get us to a straight line. There may be an operator for straightening out or flattening out your line, but I can't remember if there is or not. So we're just going to do this manually and kind of eyeball it. Okay, now that we're good with this state or this morph that we selected on and went into edit mode, we can press tab to go back into object mode. And immediately the object goes back to its basis because the value that our shape key that we created for this curve is at 0, meaning its influence on the basis, on the base of what the curve is 0 or non-existent. But if we drag the value up, its influence is increased until it is exact shape that we created in that state. These values are of course animatable, and you can create a whole bunch of them and mix different states to get a lot of interesting effects. Okay, so the entire purpose of the Assign Shape Keys add-on is that it allows you to create shape keys for an individual object made out of other curve objects. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this object and press Shift A and add a regular Bezier curve here. And then we'll add a Bezier circle curve. So say now we wanted to turn this circle into a shape key of this original Bezier curve. All we have to do is click on the circle, then shift click the Bezier curve and press Assign Shape Keys. And now it's as though the circle has been inducted into this original curve object and added as a shape key. So we come over here, we can see the Bezier circle. The shape key is named after the object's name, and we can increase this value, and there it turns into a circle. All right, let's go over some of these options here. We have Remove Shape Key Object. So if we uncheck this, when we click on all the objects that we want to be added to our single curve object as shape keys, this will leave those objects behind. For instance, we could, let's move the cursor over and then add a circle. And then I'm going to duplicate that circle up here. I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. And I'm going to subdivide this once. You can do that by right-clicking. I've added W as a hotkey for subdividing here. Then I'm going to select every other point, scale these to something like this, and say I wanted to add this to a shape key to this circle. I just click on it first, then Shift select the item that I want to have the shape key added to. And now when we press Assign Shape Keys, we've got this shape key added. As you can see, I've got the circle object here selected, and that moves up to where the original object was, because it's not just taking its shape, it's also taking its location in space. And that is actually due to this next option here. So when we have it on world space, what will happen is when we add that curve object to another curve object as a shape key, it will morph to its location. And so very often you might actually want to do that as part of a cool effect. But say we wanted to just be able to see this hovering above, so it wasn't like, you know, sitting right on it there. Like say we had a bunch of these and they were all stacked up on top of each other and it was difficult to edit or whatever, but you wanted the change to happen at the same location instead of how it does with this, where it like jumps up like that. You would switch this from world space to local space. So let's add another circle, because that one's already been defiled. And then we will duplicate this object over here. And now let's shift click this and do the same thing again. Assign shape keys. But now when we click here and then change this value, notice that this doesn't jump up at all. It stays in its local space. So leaving this option unchecked is kind of like a cookie cutter option, because you can keep adding objects to the same curve object as shape keys. Say I wanted to change this again, so we could tap A to select everything, and then I'll subdivide it again, and I'll select some choice points, scale those out like this, go back into object mode, could shift click on this, which already has that curve we added, but we can add another one just by first clicking the object we want to add to it, and then selecting the object we want added to, press Assign Shape Keys, and now we have this third shape key down here. So if we click on it, it'll change into that shape, but we can also change it into that one and mix and match these values. Who cares about curves anyway? Like, what's the point of this? We can't render this. To make curves matter, what you're going to want to do is open up either the geometry or the shape tab to give the curve some meat. So if we click on the geometry, we can extrude curves like this. And then this, of course, will render, and then you can add materials and things. So we could come down here, add a material, switch to material, shading, make this into, say, something red, and make it nice and shiny, like that. And so now back on shape keys, we have this interesting morphing thing. back under geometry, I could change this extrude level back to 0. We can also change the depth, which basically creates a pipe situation. Looks a bit like a balloon, like some kind of balloon that you fold into make balloon animals. Coming back to our shape keys. So another thing we can do with curves is use modifiers in addition to the geometry and the shape tabs, which you can use to give flesh to your curves. So let's tap A and delete everything, and I'm going to press Shift C to recenter my cursor, Shift A, and add a Bezier curve. And now I'm going to come up here close to like I'm in a top view, and then hold middle mouse and tap Alt so I can jump into the top orthographic view. I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and everything's already selected. So I'm going to press X to delete it and press Vertices because I want to delete everything that was in here. And then I want to use this to draw. Here we can draw some curves. So say I wanted to make a bottle, what I can do is draw kind of like a crude half shape of the bottle. And I'm kind of using this line right here as my guide, the y-axis. And then we can come over to the Modifiers tab and add a Screw Modifier. And then we want to switch this to Y. So since we have designed this little shape along the y-axis here, this is screwing around that y-axis like that, which is why this basically doesn't work for any other of these axes. We could clean this drawing up a little bit, tweak these values a little bit. And something else I should note is that you can delete vertices and it won't break the edge basically. If say I delete this, press X, delete vertices, it'll just dissolve that vertices there. Press Ctrl Z. I didn't want to actually do that. And we can adjust these handles. Nothing too fancy here, just want a basic example of some kind of bottle situation. Maybe make this a bit longer, bring this a bit in, and then okay, good enough. Okay, so we've got a basic bottle here. We could add some more modifiers to it. We could add solidify to give it some chunk, and we could add a subsurface modifier to give it some smooth. And now we have a bottle. So this is all done just with a curve. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities with curves in Blender. So real quickly, just to make sure that we nail in how the screw modifier is working, let's disable the effect of the screw modifier in the 3D view by clicking this button, the little TV icon here on the screw modifier. So we can take a look at that. And I'll also disable solidify and subsurface for now. I just want to make sure it's clear what the screw modifier is doing. So it's taking this curve that we've drawn and it's using the y-axis, which we know is this green one because this up here, we know that's y, and it's spinning it around that y. So to demonstrate that, let me click on item, and then let's move this y value up and down. And so if I were to do this really, really fastly, you'll sort of see what that modifier is doing. It's just creating all of these individual rotations of this object and then skinning them so that it appears to be a solid bottle. See what I'm saying? Okay, just wanted to demonstrate that real quick. Okay, I want to turn the effects of those modifiers back on in the viewport. And so let's duplicate this bottle. I'm going to right click to snap it back to where it was. So it's one bottle sitting on top of another bottle now. I'm going to press Tab to go back into edit mode, A to select everything, X and select delete vertices. because we're going to draw something else. So I'm going to click the Draw Curve button again. And this time I'm going to draw half of a wine glass. We ended up moving this down here. So I'll come down here to start where the bottle is, and I'm going to just draw the base, and then draw this up like here, and then draw the stem, and then draw some kind of crude wine glassy thing. And I've got sort of a wine glass. So let's hide the bottle for now, and let's maybe turn the thickness of this down a bit, and let's tweak a few of these values. So like I said, you can actually delete vertices and it won't hurt or break the curve, so we can do that. We can bring that in a little bit, and maybe we can adjust these handles to tighten these curves up a bit. There we go, that looks a bit nicer. Maybe bring, oops, didn't mean to also select that. Bring that in a little bit. And okay, so we've more or less got a wine glass now. Okay, let's inspect this a bit more. All right, so this is behaving right now, but sometimes I have drawn things and used the Screw Modifier, and there might be like holes or gaps and stuff. If there is a hole in your surface of your curve, you can use this merge option here in the Screw Modifier and increase the amount of which that merges if there is an issue there. And you'll notice that we basically created the bottle and the wine glass laying down flat. And the reason why I did that is because dealing with the Screw Modifier and curves in general can be a little screwy. Pardon the pun, I guess. So I really do find the best way to, if you're going to use the Draw Curve button here in Curve Edit mode, the best way to do this is when you add an object like a Bezier curve, don't rotate it, don't scale it, don't do anything to it, leave it exactly how it is. Press Tab to go into Edit mode, select everything, delete it, and then make sure you are looking at this from a top orthographic view, like you're looking straight down, and just design that way. And once you're done designing, then worry about rotating the objects. I don't need that. Let's go back into object mode, delete that. Okay, so I'm basically done with my bottle and my wine glass, so I'm free to rotate these up like this. Now that we've got two cool looking objects made entirely of curves, let's use our Assign Shape Keys add-on here to add the wine glass as a shape key to the bottle. So to do that, I'm going to click the wine glass and I'm going to shift click the bottle. But I'm also going to duplicate this so that I have these originals over here in case we want to make a variation with the way we do this. And I'm going to go ahead and click Remove Shape Key Objects and then press Assign Shape Keys. So now if we come back down to the Data tab of this curve object, we can click Open Shape Keys menu, and here is our new shape key that was added from the wine glass. So if I increase this value, now our bottle can merge seamlessly into a wine glass. As I said before, we can add additional objects after first adding shape keys to them. So we could duplicate this bottle, bring it over here. I'll make sure it's more or less in line, and then shift click what looks like the wine glass. So we'll actually turn that back there. And then we could press Assign Shape Keys. And so now we will have this, if we uncheck relative here for the shape keys option, starting from 0 going forward, we'll have this continuous animation of the bottle turning into a wine glass, turning back into a bottle. Of course, these values can be animated, so could set this to 0, could press I to insert a keyframe, bring our timeline down 90 frames, and then drag this up until it's no longer changing anymore, which is at 20. Press I to insert another keyframe, and now we have animated this. To make this a bit more interesting looking, we could Click on the material tab, give this a material, and we could increase the transmission all the way up and turn the roughness down a bit. Adjust the index of refraction, which is what IOR means. I don't know what to what, but it's fun to mess around with it. There is online huge list of like specific IOR values for very specific objects, so give that a Google search if you're interested. And we've got our morphing bottle cup here. Let's see, maybe change its base color to like a emerald green. It's kind of cool. Okay, so coming back to our menu options here where it says Vertex, this alignment is talking about how the add-on will attempt to align vertex points when creating the shape keys during the morphing. Manual alignment refers to the placement of the first vertex point. If we shift right click to move the cursor and add a Bezier curve here. When we press tab to go into edit mode, you may have noticed that this menu changes and it says mark starting vertices. This really only affects objects that have cyclic enabled. When you have a spline selected, you can come to active spline and you can turn on this button, the cyclic U, which will complete a curve like this. So if this option is active, when we press this button, you'll see a teal blue point here, and this defines the starting point of the curve. So to actually change this, you need to press enter. If I turn this off, I haven't changed it yet, and I turn it back on, there's where it was. But if we wanted to change the starting point to over here, we would click this, press enter, and now when we turn this, toggle this on and off, we'll see that it has moved there. So let's actually delete that, and I'm going to go ahead and add another circle and press tab to go back into edit mode here. Another important aspect of this when it comes to how the morphing happens between these shape keys is the direction of the spline of the curve. So to see what that actually looks like, you need to come up here and click on normals. Note that this menu item will only be here while you are in edit mode. If you're in object mode and try to find this, you will not find it. So make sure you're in edit mode, and then you'll be able to see, enable the normals, and the normals here point in the direction that the curve is going. So this changes the way that morphings will happen. So for instance, if we press Shift A, add a Bezier curve here, and let's duplicate two of these. And in this one, we have the curve going this way. So we will click the Bezier curve, shift select the circle, press assign shape keys. And when we go to adjust the value, notice that it morphs like this. Over here, let's see, are those already? Okay, the curve is going that way. Are the curves going the same direction? Yes, they are, but we could switch this by coming up to segments and click switch direction. Now when we select the Bezier, then shift select the circle, press assign shape keys, and adjust this value, notice we get a very different morphing operation here because of the direction that we changed of the circle. So everything else was exactly the same except for the direction of the circle, which we switched in edit mode. Make sure we're on this one. In edit mode, selecting the spline segment, coming up to segments and switch directions. I think this is also available in the context menu. If you right click, you should see switch direction here. So you can do that way as well. So the direction of the spline segments combined with the starting point of the curves will definitely affect the way that these things end up morphing here. Manual alignment, basically what that means is it's going to use the user's directions about where the starting point goes, and I think we're not seeing our starting point here because I don't think this is cyclic. There's the starting point there. It wants cyclic to be on the spline for some reason to display the starting vertices. That lets the user have more control. Vertex coordinates provides even more control, and if we drag the menu out here, look how far we have to drag this out to be able to see these, to see it all. Anyway, this allows us to give more specific instructions to how each vertex point in the curve should be trying to work itself out. Honestly, I wasn't able to get a lot of variation when doing tests and changing these values, but maybe something worth looking into. I think typically you're going to want to leave this on manual alignment. And then the match parts option here, this is talking about how should the assign shape keys add-on handle multiple splines within a curve object or multiple curves within a curve object. And the most common situation where you'll be doing that is with text. We're going to create some text objects, and I'll show you how you can merge and meld those. Before you get too excited, I want to say that I've not had great results with this, and I don't think this is necessarily the best way to do this. Results may vary. So let's press Shift-C to recenter our cursor, Shift-A, and add a text object. So we could press Tab to edit that text object, and we'll say type in Blender. Tab to go back to object mode, and then I'll just duplicate that, right-click to snap it exactly back to where it was, tab again, and we'll backspace, and I think I'll just do Blender but lowercase this time. We'll see how that works out. I'm going to select both of these, and then under Object, come down to Convert, and then Curve. So now these text objects are now curve objects, which means we can no longer edit them like text. And so what I was saying before with this Match Parts option, this is talking about how should the Assign Shape Keys add-on try to match the different objects, or they're actually called splines, the segments, with different ones. So by default, it will try to match whatever's closest, but this typically doesn't work really great, even if we were to scale this up. So I'm going to select these and duplicate these so that we have these originals over here so we can do some more tests. And then you want to select the one that you want to become the shape key. You always want to select the thing you want to become the shape key first, and then shift select the object that you want to possess the shape keys. It will be the object that is there once you press the button. So we'll press Assign Shape Keys with the default settings here. And so now the uppercase version text object curve has been added as a shape key. We come down to value, we can switch these like this. And notice that this does not look that great. So we've got some issues going on here. The L here is merging into this B. That's obviously not what we want. What we would want is for this L to correspond to this L, but that doesn't happen. So actually, since I have this on local space, we actually don't have to have these sitting on top of each other. We can move them in global space, and the add-on will still try to merge the shape key into the local space of whatever object we do that. So I can move this out. We could duplicate these here. So I've got these originals to mess with later if I want. And then we'll shift select both of these and take a look at their starting points. So if we click Mark Starting Vertices, we'll see all the starting vertex points of all these splines. So the idea here would be to try to line these up with their counterparts of where you want them to kind of meld into. And another thing to be aware of here is that though your brain says, oh, it's a B, there's a B there, that's one object. There's actually two curves. So we have, for this right here, we have this inner curve here, and we have this outer curve here. So the add-on thinks of all these individual curves, like the inside of this E, as an additional element. So that's why it gets its own starting point, and you have to be aware of that when you're thinking about how these things merge. Really, no amount of messing with this I think is going to give you the results you're looking for. but we can try. So we would want a starting point there, and so we would want these two to correspond with these two, which they should because they'll be the closest to each other. And I have to remember that this is going to be interpreted as local space because that's what we set it to do there. So basically the add-on, once we press assign shape keys, it's going to be like the origin point of this object is the same as the origin point here. That's how it's going to be handled. Yeah, let's fix these back there. That one there, that one there, that one there, that one there. And then starting point there, and then the starting point, I guess that one would be the best. There, 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 counter. This one goes with this one. And there may be some ultimate way to get this to work right, but I just don't think it's worth the tedium. There's better ways to blend things in, in Blender. But let's press tab to go into object mode. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate these so you can see the difference of what I'm talking about with local space versus world space. So once again, we'll select the capital letters because we want this to become a shape key of the lowercase letter one. And then shift select it, press assign shape keys. And let's see what we get this time. And it doesn't really seem to make a difference at all. Yeah, but notice that at the very least that these are in the same space. But if I were to switch this to world space and then shift select these and assign shape keys, whoops, the convention is we've been adding the uppercase one as a shape key to the lowercase one. So let's do that again. Assign shape keys. With that as world space, we should see this kind of moving down kind of thing when we adjust this value. Yeah, you can see it moving to its actual space there. You can change this to custom, and this gives you a similar kind of options as the vertex coordinates alignment. And this is talking about the bounding box of each curve object. You're telling the add-on which direction or which value should get precedence when trying to move one vertex from one object to another. Really, none of these values are going to give you the results of what you're looking for. I think your best bet, if you were really, really determined to do text melding like this, would be to work with individual letter by letter transformations. And then also what I would say is you would have to make sure that the segments are all going in the right direction. So you would want to check the normals, which we have checked, but under shape here, these normals only show up if the shape is in 3D mode, and kind of a bit hard to see like that, so we could decrease their size. So I think it's possible to get some decent results with text melding here, but it would have to be on a letter by letter basis and a lot of work. And I think there's probably better ways to do that. One other thing I should mention is that you can only use the assign shape keys with curves that are of the type Bezier. So if you've created a NURB or a polycurve or some other weird thing, you can switch it to Bezier by selecting everything in edit mode and under curve, set spline type to Bezier, and then that will at least allow you to use this and merge the two curve types. So as I've mentioned, there's a lot of issues with trying to do cool text meldings that don't, I think, look awkward and weird. So this might not actually be the best way to do that. But there's actually another issue I wanted to mention real quick, and that has to do with the match parts section. No matter what this is on, if you have different amounts of letters or objects, the objects where there's no counterpart object close enough or there's too many, they will appear empty. So say I were to duplicate this a few times, say this was, we made this as a text object and then converted it into a curve, it's going to do the same thing. So we could click on here, click assign shape keys. And when we do, because there was no corresponding curves, these just went empty. So that's another issue with trying to meld text this way. So just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, so that's going to do it for the Assign Shape Keys add-on. Thanks very much for watching. I do think this is a really neat add-on that can deliver some really neat results for specific instances. And I definitely feel like I haven't thought of all the different situations where it would be great to be able to add curve objects as shape keys of one particular object and then be able to morph between all of those values. Because curves are not just used as objects that you render, they're used all over the place in Blender for like creating camera tracks, for creating bone rigs and stuff like that. So you can imagine a situation where you're creating a camera track or armature controls where maybe you want to merge those values somehow. I think it's just a really cool thing to be aware of, and that's why I made this video. So hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. So I've got the documentation for the add-on open here, and I'm going to go ahead and read it in case anyone wants to hear it. Assign shape keys. This add-on lets you assign one or more Bezier curves as shape keys to another curve. Useful for morphing curves and curve-based text objects. Activation. Open Blender and go to Preferences, then the Add-ons tab. Click Add Curve, then Assign Shape Keys to enable the script. Interface. Located in the 3D Viewport Sidebar Edit tab. Usage. Select the target and shape key Bezier curve objects. Make sure the target is the active object. You can do this by shift right mouse clicking. I think that would be left mouse clicking these days. The target curve after the other selections are made. Go to the Curve Shape Keys tab and click Assign Shape Keys button. Now a copy of the active object curve will be created, which will have the other selected curves as its target. If the Remove Shape Key Objects option is checked, the selected curve objects will be deleted and only the target is kept. There are some options to align the closed cyclic spline target and the shape key curves. Also, it's possible to match individual parts from a multi-part, multiple splines, of target and shape key curves, e.g. a text object converted into a curve, based on various criteria. So talking about trying to line up the individual letters in two different text curve objects. For smoother transition, you can subdivide the segments of one of the curves in the selection group. Manual alignment of starting vertices. In edit mode, the Assign Shape Keys panel shows a single button, Mark Starting Vertices. When clicked, all the starting vertices of the closed splines, disconnected parts, of the selected curves are indicated by a marking point. Now if you select any vertex, the marker moves to this selected vertex, indicating the new starting vertex. You need to confirm the new positions by pressing Return. Pressing Escape reverts the positions to the earlier order. And there you have it. Thanks very much for watching, especially if you stuck around to the end of this video. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed, and let me know down in the comments below if you plan on using this add-on, if you think it would be helpful to you at all. If you've got some interesting ideas for use cases, stuff like that, that would be really cool to share with me and everyone else. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.